Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. Let's start today's meeting. Item number 1, the adoption of our agenda. If there are no objections from your side, I propose to adopt the agenda as it has been presented. Item number 2, we have the approval of minutes of meetings. The minutes of our meetings on the 1st and 2nd of September and the 14th of October have been distributed to your offices. My announcements can be brief. Our meeting is as usual being web streamed except for the parts held in camera. For our meeting today and our meeting tomorrow, we have interpretation in the following languages: English, French, German, Italian, Dutch, Greek, Spanish, Portuguese, Finnish, Swedish, Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, Hungarian, Polish, Slovakian, Slovenian, Bulgarian, Croatian, Romanian, and Passive Czech. May I once again remind you that all the interpreters rely on the quality of the sound and video of remote participants in order to get your message across. Please do be aware that phone interventions and audio-only connections cannot be interpreted. Let me stress that it is mandatory for members physically present in meetings to wear a mask at all times except while speaking. Item number 4, Chair's announcements concerning coordinators' decisions. In line with Rule 214 of Parliament's Rules of Procedure, the final record of decisions of the AFET coordinators meeting on the 18th of November this year has been uploaded on the AFET intranet with all other documents for this meeting. They will be attached to the minutes of this meeting. Item number 5, exchange of views on 1 year since the ceasefire between Azerbaijan and Armenia. On the 9th of November, we marked the first anniversary of the ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It was signed following the deadly military confrontations that started on the 27th of September last year. This 6-week-long conflict claimed the lives of more than 6,500 people, and unfortunately, despite the ceasefire agreement, military personnel and civilians continued to die on and around the front line. As recently as 2 weeks ago, deadly clashes erupted on the border between the two countries, giving rise to the worst fighting since the signing of the ceasefire agreement. The AFET standing rapporteurs and the chair of our delegation for relations with the South Caucasus immediately called for the rapid de-escalation of the situation and welcomed the signing of the ceasefire. I welcome the renewed will of the Armenian and Azerbaijani presidents to sit together and to negotiate, to discuss some of the most contentious issues linked to the conflict, such as border delimitation, demining, and the exchange of war prisoners. The meeting on the 26th of September in Sochi was a first important step in this respect. All of us now look forward to the forthcoming meeting, which will take place on the sidelines of the Eastern Partnership Summit on the 15th of December here in Brussels. The EU, that is clear, remains committed to a lasting conflict settlement based on confidence-building measures and on a quick resumption of negotiations within the process led by the Minsk Group chairs. With all that in mind, I have invited representatives from the EEAS and the Commission's DG NEAR to take stock of the developments since the ceasefire agreement and to exchange views on the current situation on the ground, as well as on the challenges ahead of us in this very complex region. Regrettably, the EU Special Representative for the South Caucasus and the crisis in Georgia, Toivoklar, had to cancel his participation at a short notice. First, I would like to warmly welcome, and he's sitting up front next to me, Luc de Vigne, a regular and welcome guest in this committee, the Deputy Managing Director for Russia, Eastern Partnership, Central Asia, Regional Cooperation and OSCE at the European External Action Service, back to our committee. Mr. de Vigne, as you will also cover Mr. Klaar's remarks related to the situation on the ground and to our position as EU and our actions in the region, I will give you the floor for 10 minutes. After we have heard Mr. de Vigne, I will welcome Lawrence Meredith from the DG NEAR, and then we have the possibility for an exchange of views with members. Mr. de Vigne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, honourable members of the European Parliament. Indeed, Toivoklar could not make it because he is actually travelling in the Caucasus to prepare to prepare the meetings that you've alluded to of the President Aliyev of Azerbaijan and Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia in the margins of the soon-to-come Eastern Partnership Summit, 15 December. Both leaders have been invited by President of European Council, Charles Michel, to have side meetings during this summit. It is quite clear, as you have referred to, Mr. Chairman, that the situation remains very tense. A bit more than 1 year after this bloody 44-day war, and the recent clashes that you've alluded to in the middle of November, with serious casualties on the international border. And it is important to underline it, not in the Karabakh region, but international border, is worrying. The EU institutions have reacted promptly in the sense that President Michel had the day after, on 16 November, telephone calls with both leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, obviously asking for urgent de-escalation and full ceasefire, as well as the EU Special Representative was in contact with the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs and the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister. As after 17 November, the situation has stabilized in the sense there has been no more shootings or killings, but it remains a very tense situation. On 19 November, President Michel again called the two leaders offering to discuss around 15 December. We also have seen that both leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan established a direct communication channel between the military at the Ministry of Defense level in order to prevent a re-happening of the latest incident, and was put in place on 19 November. You have also seen that on 26 November in Sochi, invited by President Putin, both leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan met. They issued a statement basically agreeing on three things. First, to increase the stability and the security through the work of a bilateral commission on the delimitation of the state border with consultative assistance of Russia, which was requested by the parties. You know that indeed the demarcation of the state border, and I underline this is the state border, this is nothing to do with the Karabakh conflict, is disputed. Secondly, they announced, but without giving much detail, that they made significant progress on so-called sensitive issues of humanitarian nature. I suspect that behind that lies the issue of prisoners of war, but we don't have details. And the Armenians still claim that they have a number of prisoners of war in Azerbaijan, which the Azeri deny the status of prisoners of war. They say that they are terrorists who have violated the border of Azerbaijan. And thirdly, they discussed economic issues and unblocking the transport corridors. You have to be aware that the name corridor is not liked at all by Armenia because it presupposes that Armenia would not have the control of what goes in, what goes out, etc. in that so-called corridor. But for the convenience of our understanding, I'll refer to corridors, railway and road links, which were supposed to connect Azerbaijan with the western part of Azerbaijan, Nakhchivan, and further Turkey. So they announced that this trilateral working group on these economic so-called corridors would meet. What is another element, a positive, I would say, element, is that in the framework of the OSCE Minsk process, and as you know, the OSCE Minsk process is the only international format agreed to resolve the conflict of around Karabakh, even if Azerbaijani rhetoric says the conflict is resolved, but the latest clashes demonstrate the opposite, as well as the rhetoric. And the foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan met the co-chairs of the Minsk Group twice in autumn, in September and November, and are supposed to meet tomorrow in the margins of the OSCE Ministerial in Stockholm. So to conclude, our position is obviously to try to have a secure, stable and prosperous South Caucasus, which is also important for us since the three countries belong to Eastern Partnership, and that we also are developing connectivity in the region, and obviously connectivity and state of war or hostility is contradictory. You know that President Michel went in July to the region, Commissioner Varey as well, and three foreign ministers of EU member states went as well in June on behalf of the High Representative. So there is clearly a commitment and a willingness from our side. But obviously the situation is very much also in the hands of the military and those who have boots on the ground, which is only Russia at this stage. It is quite clear that very very acute issues like the release of detainees and the demining, respectively for Armenia and Azerbaijan, I think are clearly complicating the issues, and it is, I think, not rational to believe that there will be much peace without these two issues being resolved. So we remain, and I'll finish by that, Mr. Chairman, remain supportive of the Minsk Group process of the OSCE led by its co-chairs, as being the only internationally agreed format to have an in-depth resolution of that conflict and a peace treaty, which of course is badly missing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luc de Vigne, for your introductory remarks. And now I hand over to Lawrence Meredith from DG NEA. I understand that he is connected remotely. Mr. Meredith, you have the floor for 7 minutes.
Please press on the speak button. Thank you. Only once.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, but we cannot see you.
Good morning. We can hear you, but we can't see you.
I'm very sorry about this.
Now we can see you. Fine. Go ahead.
Okay, super. Thank you. I'm so sorry. We had huge difficulties with the internet this morning. I do apologize, Chair. No, thank you very much for inviting me to join this very important meeting. I would have liked to have been there in person, but unfortunately my son got COVID last night, so it's been a little bit of a frantic 24 hours. I would just like to be very brief and add to what Mr. de Vigne has already said. I joined Commissioner Varey in his recent meetings with all three foreign ministers of the Caucasus and the margins of the Eastern Partnership Ministerial a couple of weeks ago. And of course that was shortly before or the day before the tragic resumption of violence between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I just want to be very clear on our side, on the European Commission, that we are extremely committed to do everything possible to enable a sustainable peace in the interests of all the countries of the Caucasus. And I think Mr. de Vigne has been very clear also about the actions, both of the External Action Service and President Michel. I know that's also the ambition of this House. On our side, we're ready to mobilize all our instruments. We've already put 17 million euros of humanitarian assistance following the 44-day war last year. We're looking at all the options now as to how we can engage and regain trust between the parties in this situation, especially important on the eve of the Eastern Partnership Summit. We're also looking at, in the context of the proposed economic and investment plan, Commissioner Varey and our services are looking at all the possibilities to invest in a way that is in the interests of the parties in a sustainable peace. So in particular in those regions affected by conflict, and to see how we can strengthen connectivity. And of course, the crucial principle is it must be what the parties can agree on. That is paramount, and of course we do so all in support of the agreed formats. We also know that the Georgians are reaching out and seeking to undertake mediation facilitation where the parties can agree to that, and that has the full support also of our side. So we will mobilize our instruments. We have, as you know from this House, a program called EU for Dialogue. Of course, the situation has changed so substantially since it was initially designed, but it is a flexible instrument, and it can allow both for confidence building and for some socio-economic support. It also works in partnership with the UN, with civil society, and with member states. So on our side, we're strongly committed to find every way possible to support steps towards a sustainable peace. Thank you very much, Chair, and apologies for the connection difficulties.
Thank you, Mr. Meredith. I will now give the floor first to the Chair of our standing delegation with the countries of the Southern Caucasus, Marina Kaljurand. Is she connected?
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. And to start with, I would really like to thank Mr. Davini and Mr. Meredith for being with us today and explaining the situation. I absolutely agree that the situation 1 year after ceasefire is worrisome, is troubling, is tense. And that is the reason why, with standing rapporteurs on Armenia and Azerbaijan, I have been keeping very close eye on the situation, and we have tried to make our positions very clear with the statements that also Chair mentioned. I have had bilateral meetings with the Armenian Foreign Minister, with Azerbaijani ambassador, Armenian ambassador, and if I might say on a very subjective feeling, then I do not see today much appetite for reconciliation. There are still lots of accusations coming from each side. Unfortunately, rhetorics, especially from Azerbaijani side, has not changed. There are smaller things that are not small in this context, like the Victory Memorial in Baku, which definitely does not help to making the situation better. You mentioned very right points, and I would like maybe to underline a couple of more. In Strasbourg in 2 weeks, we will have PCC with Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, the normal working routine was disturbed by the COVID pandemic, but in February, I hope to go to Yerevan and finally start meeting people face to face. But now coming to the PCC with Azerbaijan, I see a new trend. Azerbaijan refuses to put on agenda Nagorno-Karabakh. So the question they are trying to show now is the conflict between Armenia, Azerbaijan more widely. And if we look at the recent border incidents on internationally recognized borders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, that trend for me is also worrisome. There are still captives, prisoners of war, other captives, and with the recent clashes, I understand that the number has again grown, with additional 30 plus Armenians being arrested. The question of connections, I do see that there are positive improvements, but at the same time, the location of the connection, I do not want to use the word corridor, creates lots of tensions. Where Armenia wants to return back to the routes that were used before, they're referring to the Soviet time routes. Azerbaijan wants to find the new ones. So here is also one of my questions to the speakers. You mentioned the visits, you mentioned the phone calls, and I do not doubt that there is commitment from the EU side. But what can we do more, and what can we do better? I also agree very much with Mr. Levin that the power is in the hands of those whose troops are on the ground. But that should not be excuse for us, for EU being more engaged. Unfortunately, I haven't seen it much so far. The agreements that have been reached, the exchanges of prisoners that have been reached, ceasefire that has been reached, has all been mediated by Russia. And EU has been kind of sidelined in this process. So my question is, where, how, and what can and we should do better? And my question also to Mr. Meredith is, you said that you are looking in all options, you're looking into economic and investment plans, you're looking into the program EU for dialogue, but can you please be more precise? What exactly is on the table? And to conclude, first, I think we have to continue being very precise, very vocal on the need of international solution of the conflict, because the conflict is not solved, conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, with the participation of OSCE, Minsk co-chairs. Full stop. There are no other alternatives. Yes, I recognize the bilateral discussions between two countries, and the demarcation might lead to kind of confidence building between those countries.
Marina, can I ask you to conclude?
Yes, and so these are two of my main questions, and I'm once again, thank you for being with us at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement and your precise questions. We have two standing rapporteurs for Azerbaijan and Armenia in our committee, and I will now give the floor to them for 3 minutes. Ms. Zofko, who is the standing rapporteur for Azerbaijan, cannot be with us, so her statement will be read out by Michael Gahler.
Yes, thank you very much. And as Juliana Zofko is on her way back as chief observer from Honduras, she cannot make it. She says, Dear Chair, dear colleagues, 1 year after the ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan, I strongly regret the continued frequent military